Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bible Hangout. I am Reverend Sherri James, and I am Senior Minister of Understanding Principles for Better Living Church. We are a New Thought, Bible-based Christian church in Inglewood, California, and we were founded by the actress, singer, songwriter, Reverend Dr. Della Reese-Lett, and we have been carrying on the church that she founded more than 30 years ago. And so I am excited to be here with you tonight because this Bible study grew out of really the Bible study that I was teaching at church when I was the assistant minister. And I just had too much information to share on Sunday in class. And so I started teaching it online, which was like unheard of at that time, or, it was like 2013, 2011, somewhere around there. And I started teaching it online because it was just, it was kind of an overflow class, basically, of all the material that I'd gathered. And so it has grown now, and we are in our 6th year with the Bible Hangout. So very excited about that. Tonight, we're going to take a slight detour. We are currently in a series based on the Reverend Dr. Mary Ann Tumpkin's Introduction to Student's Guide to the Hebrew Scriptures. But I have been at Saddleback all week, and so my mind I have not thought about Exodus other than to know that it's in the back of my mind to prepare. But I also thought that it would be valuable for you to hear some of the information that me and my team members received at Saddleback. I think that it was just a really remarkable experience, and I really care about our churches, our study groups, our centers. I care about the fact that we are struggling, and I know that when there is a struggle, that generally what solves struggle is skill acquisition. And so any hurdle that you are trying to get across that you haven't been able to get across, it's simply a matter of developing the skill to move beyond that hurdle. And so this week, we have been in skill acquisition mode as a church, and I want to share these things with you. So I'm going to just pull out like the salient points. There's so much information, and as I was looking and trying to decide, okay, what do I share, I actually was concerned because I thought, gosh, I don't want to. The thing is that it really is a whole system, but hopefully what I can do is share enough information to intrigue you and compel you to go and seek the information on your own. Pastor Rick Warren is very generous with his information. He freely shares it. He has a site, pastors.com, which has a ton of resources for pastors, for ministers, for spiritual directors. And something I learned from Reverend Johnny and from Reverend Mary is that you let anybody teach you. Like anybody can teach you. And so Reverend Johnny, she didn't confine her learning to what was being offered in New Thought. She went far outside of the organization, even if it wasn't to, say, another spiritual organization, to do what she needed to do in order to grow Christ Unity Temple, which became Christ Universal Temple, and then ultimately the Universal Foundation for Better Living. The same thing is true of the Reverend Dr. Mary Ann Tumpkin. She also was just a student of the game of ministry. And I don't mean that ministry is a game in the sense of like playing, but I do mean that it's a game in the sense that if you gamify the experience for yourself as a pastor, that you can take some of the pressure off of you that I think we feel when we have the responsibility of these organizations on our shoulders. So, so with that, I'm excited to jump in. This is a free form discussion. It's very loose. I've done like some loose planning, but I just wanted to give enough to intrigue you. And I realized I'm going to try something that I haven't tried before, but we're going to try. We're going to see if it goes. I'm going to simulcast on Facebook. Let's see if that works. I don't know. It might. It might all blow up in my face. I'm not sure. Okay. I'm doing this live, meaning if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see all of the setup. But hey, let's just go for it. Okay. Oh, everything is moving so slow. Let me get this hotspot going. Okay. All right, we are. I think we might have a simulcast going on Facebook, y'all. Okay. All right, all right, all right, all right. This is good. There we go. Connect. Okay. All right. So we got a simulcast going on Facebook. So hey, that way people can come and join us live and be a part of the conversation. So I guess my question is for you guys to let me know what the experience is for you, because there's a little bit of a time delay. So I'm going to try not to like see my face on camera and have it startle me. There's a little bit of a time delay as far as the information. So, but feel free to ask questions. Let me know what your experience is with it, and we'll see how it goes. And hopefully everything comes out right because I'm recording it. Okay. So first, let's just pray. I just want to take a moment to just center ourselves and just to recognize that there's only one power, there's only one presence. That power, that presence is God the good, omnipotent, the everywhere, evenly present spirit of absolute good. And that presence of good has enabled me to gather some information to share, to bring to my brothers and my sisters, to share with them that will help us to strengthen our ministries, to be more effective in our ministries, and to just bless the people that we have been called to serve. And so I thank you, God, for just it's helping me to translate this information, to share it in a way that empowers and sets people on fire to keep studying, keep learning, and just to realize that the challenges that we face in our centers around the world have more to do with skill acquisition than they do with the authority on which we stand and which we bring forward our message. And so I bless this conversation, and I thank you, God, that it is a blessing for all who hear it. In the name and nature of the one that is called the Christ, the I am, we say thank you, God, and so it is, and amen. Okay, let's get it. I don't know if this is live on Facebook or not. It doesn't look like it is, but we're gonna keep going. Okay, so one of the questions that he asked is, what is it that is keeping your church from growing? So a lot of times the questions that we are asking is questions like, why won't my people give? Or why don't more people participate? Or why don't more people come to church? And so the question that is important when you are establishing the foundation for a healthy church is really to ask, what is keeping my church from growing? And I love that question because everything grows. Everything grows. If something is not growing, it's dying. If you think about just your body, for example, each of us started as just a single cell, right? And then we grew in our mother's wombs, but we started, as just a single cell, and that blossomed into the embryo, and then from the embryo into the fetus, and then from the fetus, and it goes on and on until we were a fully formed infant in our mother's wombs, and then we were birthed, and then the growth didn't stop. We continued to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. Now, I learned, I didn't know that this even existed, but it became part of my awareness when Jordan, when I received Jordan, there was a point in his life where he had stopped growing. And when babies stop growing, they are actually diagnosed with something called failure to thrive. And so when Jordan first came to live with me, he was 14 months old, and something just wasn't right. His head size wasn't right, because those are things that they are measuring. If you've ever had a baby, you go to the doctor, and those regular visits, they're taking measurements, because what they want to know is the head continuing to grow? Is the body continuing to lengthen? Like, are the signs of growth there? So When I got him at 14 months, the question was, why is he not growing? What's keeping him from growing? And that's the question that we had to answer. And so we started looking at nutrition. We started looking at, what types of input was he receiving, not just what was going in his mouth, but just even like sensory information, like what was happening. There was a whole battery of tests that were done to understand what was going on, what was contributing to this failure to thrive. When you have a church that's not growing, meaning that you're not adding new members, you have to ask the question, what is keeping the church from growing? And if the church is not receiving some basic things, then those basic things can keep the lid on growth for a church. And that was really what made this weekend so powerful, what made it so wonderful. Weekend, still the week. Like I'm so used to doing conferences on the weekend, so just being there, I kept thinking Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Like I was telling her, it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's what made this week so powerful, is that we began to look at what is keeping our organizations from growing. So there are many things, but to go into, but I'm going to jump ahead to, and feel free to ask questions. So this is definitely meant to be a free form conversation. I'm going to jump ahead to the thing that he said today that I thought really it landed with me, which is that very often when churches are not growing, that you have a bottleneck at the top. That essentially you have a bottleneck at the top, and you probably have a leader or a pastor who doesn't mean this isn't like a judgment or anything like that, but who is controlling everything in the church, meaning that controlling what everything looks like, and everything has to be signed off by the pastor, and they're almost like QC for everything. And the problem with the pastor being QC for everything and no one else being empowered to be QC on behalf of the pastor is that if whatever else the pastor has going on, it gets bottlenecked at the top because there's only so much work that you can do. And so what they teach us, thank you, Ray, I see your question, I'm going to get to it. What they teach us, or what he talks about, is that if you are a pastor and that's your style of leadership, then probably the biggest your church can grow to is about 175 to 200 people. Because beyond that, it becomes impossible for you to maintain that type of control. And so in order for a church to grow, there's two sacrifices that have to be made. And I thought this like when he said it, it set off bells inside of me, like, oh yes. In order for a church to grow, the pastor has to give up control of the ministry. The pastor has to give up control of the ministry. And the other sacrifice it has to make is that the membership has to give up control of the leadership. So what happens when you have these churches where there's about 175 to 200 people is that everybody knows everybody. The pastor knows everyone, and you're at everyone's house, or you have the ability to visit people's homes. You're not at everybody's house, but you're in people's homes, you're hanging out with them, you're going to dinner with them. Once you get above a certain number, there's just too much to do, and there's just not the time to be available to that many people. And so many churches never get beyond the 175 to 200 number because the pastors themselves are unwilling to give up the control. And so if you want to grow the organization, you got to let go of control. And the membership has to let go of you being so familiar or connected to them. And change is not easy. And this was one of the last things he said in today's workshop. And when he said it, I was like, yeah, we know what that feels like. He says that part of what happens when you start to grow is you get criticism. And the one thing he said is that he called it a care issue. And what it sounds like is, you know, I just don't feel as connected to my church as I used to. You know, and really what people are saying is, you know, you're not available to me like you used to be. And then you got the control issue. And this is where, you know, someone is like, you know, gosh, it's just not, you know, it's just not as fun as it used to be. And really what they're saying is that, you know, I'm not the only person that you're referring to anymore for anything. Or you got the comfort issue, you know, where you got more people coming into the church. And so the thing is that you can't grow without discomfort. And so more people coming into the church means that you might not get that seat that you love to sit in, that you love to be the only one in that seat. Somebody might sit in your seat and you got to be comfortable with that. And so those that really, really stood out to me. That really stayed with me. To your question, Ray, the question you asked was, has this issue of growth been addressed by USBL? So, yes, it has. It's been talked about. However, I feel like there's more to do to address it. So I think people are definitely talking about, like, what is it going to take for our centers to grow? But I don't know that it has moved out of the talk stage and into the action stage, into the let's solve this problem stage. So that's some of the work that we're doing at a church and that we are freely sharing with those in the UFBL as well as anyone else and anyone else anywhere. To be honest, there's no limit on who we would share this with, but I have a personal heart for New Thought churches. I feel like we have a message of self-empowerment that lets people know that they are more than what appears between their hat and their boots. I feel that we have a message that affirms the divine nature of all people, and there's no one that gets excluded from our hearts, at least on an intellectual level, even if we're still working to live it in practice. We have a message that is embracing of people who express differently, that there are no wrong people in New Thought. There are people that are simply living beneath their divine privilege, but there are no wrong people. And so I care about that message. That message saved my life. That message awakened me to a greater level of being. That message transformed me. I mean, and I when I was 17, my mom introduced me to Tony Robbins and Les Brown. And I'm not putting Tony Robbins so much in that New Thought category, but in a lot of ways he is. I don't think he would describe himself like that. But his message, as you guys know, and I know you've studied some of his stuff, it very much dovetails with a lot of the things that we talk about. Tony, he's much more into the human potential movement, but there are a lot of correlations. We have the language of God, they have the language of science, but it's still, there's a lot of correlations between it. But Les Brown was ordained by Johnny Coleman and is a Universal Foundation for Better Living minister, even though he's not actively practicing as one. He is actually the person who first gathered the community that ultimately became Universal Truth Center in Miami Gardens, Florida. So getting that message at 17, getting these ideas in my heart at that age, it just really transformed how I saw myself. And so even though I was going through school and I was, you know, so it was like I was at high school, straight A student, right? Graduated with, you know, 4.0, more than a 4.0, but above a 4.0, and just, you know, killing the game, and got to college and got my first couple of D's, like a couple of D's and a couple of Z's. It was just a mess. It was a whole mess. And so it shook my self-confidence. But, you know, and like wonder, like, what in the world is going on? But because I had this message in my head, I had gotten from Les Brown and from Tony Robbins at 17 before I ever got to college, something in me knew that even though I wasn't getting the grades, that had nothing to do with my intelligence. That had nothing to do with my ability to think. And I was able to make this separation between how I was showing up and who I actually was. And I really owe that to those early New Thought messages that I heard that that really helped me to do that, to make that separation. And I think a lot of us have trouble separating what we do from who we are. And so when we make mistakes or when we go through challenges like that, the mistake, we so identify our identity with the mistake that it literally crushes us. And so we spend a lifetime trying to come back. And because we never heal those places in us, it's almost like they become the thorn in the side, like a crutch that's keeping us from running at top speed. So I care about this message. I care about the propagation of this message. I care about our ministers having what they need in order to carry this message out. So that's what we're doing at church. That's some of the stuff that we are taking out and looking at for on behalf of New Thought and on behalf of anybody else that wants the information. Ray says, okay, I wondered because I had previously attended Agape and it was way too big. However, I attended seminars by Tony Robbins and I didn't feel that sense of isolation. There was a different vibe. And Alita says, God, the greatest scientist. Yes, 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 yes. So I thank you for saying that, Ray, that last part I have never attended Agape as a church. I am a huge fan of a lot of the things that they do. I love Michael Beckwith and Ricky Byers and anybody that's associated with Agape. So I can't really speak to their ministry, but I can tell you the things that I learned this week that I think contribute to the experience, and why maybe you had a different experience with Tony Robbins than you did with, say, Agape. So one of the things so there's a question that I've been asking because I expect explosive growth for Upchurch. I expect Upchurch to go off into the stratosphere. So which I learned this week means I expect myself to grow, because no organization can go beyond the consciousness of the leaders. So what I learned this week is that when your church begins to grow, the role of the pastor changes. When your church begins to grow, the role of the pastor changes. And it starts out as ministry. So, I am the classic, right now, small church pastor. I'm in folks' homes. I know everybody's names. I'm proud I know everybody's names. And that's a big deal to me. Like, there's actually a couple people, for whatever reason, I keep mixing. They come together and I keep mixing up their names, and it burns my butt that I can't remember their names, because it's important to me to remember names. If there's somebody in the hospital, I'm there. And if somebody's going through something, I'm there. And if somebody needs some help, I'm there. And above a certain number, that type of hands-on connection is just not possible. But there is a solution to that. And what they have really done a great job of, I just want to say perfected, but nothing perfect, but what they have done an excellent job of at Saddleback is creating small groups. And your small groups do the work of taking care of the people. And so the work in the small groups is focused, it infused in the construction of the small groups are what Rick calls the 5 purposes of the church. So maybe I'll go back to that and share that with you, and then come ahead to small groups. So those of you that have gone through the ministerial program with USBL, you will recognize this information, because Reverend Mary, I learned this, went to Saddleback and then translated this material for USBL. And so if you've gone through the ministerial program anytime since the early 2000s, you got this information. You were taught the purpose-driven church. what anyway, I'm not going to get into that. So the 5 purposes of the church. The first one is to love God with all your heart. And that's worship. That's worshiping God. Love is worship. The second one is to love your neighbor as yourself. And that's ministry. That's about ministering to yourself, meaning how do I take care of me? How do I prioritize what is important to me? And it's also about ministering to other people, because I'm not here just to get for my purposes alone. When I get, I'm supposed to give, and when I learn, I'm supposed to teach. Hence why we're having a conversation about what I learned this week. When I get, that's a Maya Angelou quote. She says, "When I get, give, and when I learn, teach." And that formula is a formula that basically encompasses the second purpose of the church, which is ministry. Then go make disciples. So I have a responsibility to take this information out and to share it and to help other people become students of this information. So and the making disciples is about, the word disciple means student. So when we talk about Jesus's disciples, what we're saying is Jesus's students. And so my job is to go and make people students of this information, to go out, take it out into the world, share it with people. And there are active ways. So part of making someone a student is making the case for sharing the information. So one of the things that I've talked about with my colleagues that were there with me this week is, what is that message of urgency for New Thought? I know what the message of urgency is for a traditional teaching, right? It's like, let me help you, let me get you saved before you die. And even if on your last breath you could make that confession, you're saved, you good. I got you before the breath left your body. And there is a level of urgency. I know you know this, and I know that's what sent you out, of why you're not at XYZ church down the street. It is an urgency. It is BOF. I'm cleaning this up for the broadcast. BOF, butt on fire. But let me get to you before you make the mistake of dying without making this confession. And so one of the things that I think we are challenged with in New Thought is we don't have that level of urgency, because time is man-made. I have all of eternity to live out the lessons of my soul. I am not trying to live right to escape a hell. Heaven and hell are states of consciousness. So I'm also not trying to ensure that I go someplace after I die. I recognize that life is eternal, and that when I shuffle off this mortal coil, that life itself continues. The personality called Sherri disappears, but the life force that animates this personality called Sherri is eternal. It has no beginning, it has no end. It didn't begin when I was born, and it will not end when I, quote unquote, die. So what then is our urgency? And that's the question that we're working with, because, and I think we do have one, I just don't know that it's been articulated. And I feel like that sense of urgency that we have is that you and me are seeds, we're ideas, and that we were birthed into this form to bring forward an idea, or the manifestation of that idea, that is for the forward movement of humankind, or of all spiritual beings. And I believe that we have a responsibility to do the work, to refine, discover, refine, release, and express our divine gift. I think that is more important above anything else that we are doing. And I include all expressions of good in what it is that's your purpose here on earth. So Roger Bannister's contribution to humankind was bring down the stronghold in the human mind that a man could not run faster than 4 minutes. And now if you run a 4-minute mile, at least as far as professional athletes are concerned, you are slow. I feel like, people like Serena Williams, the stronghold in the minds of people of who can play tennis and who can be a champion, and that is part of her contribution to humankind, the knocking down of barriers. And so I feel like those feats are as much of value to humankind as is the spreading of the gospel, if you will. And so I include all of them in that. Jack says the yearning of your heart. Yes, the yearning of your heart. And so to me, that is what the reason that we have to go and make disciples of this teaching is that people are walking around living beneath their spiritual privilege, angry and frustrated because they don't know how to get what's inside of them out into expression. And they don't know that that's what's causing them frustration. One of the challenges, now I got to go back and get this research. This is something I read years ago, so I might misquote it a little bit, but you'll get the essence. One of the things that sends people into prison is lack of education. I don't mean that educated people don't go to prison, but one of the things that unlocks something for people when they are in an imprisoned environment is to begin to educate the mind. Because remember, nothing can express in the body before it expresses in the mind. So I know we're angry at the criminal justice system, or it ain't the justice system. I know we got all these issues with it, but you don't go to jail in the body unless you first go to jail in your mind. And so there is a freeing of the mind that has to happen. Part of the reason that we need a prison ministry in New Thought, and all of our churches need some type of prison ministry, is that our job is to go in there and to help those men and women free their minds from the idea of themselves as being limited and being locked up. And so we must go and make disciples of them, meaning that we must not make you, but I must present a compelling case for why you need to look for, discover, refine, and release your divine purpose. The fourth purpose of the church is to baptize them in the name of, right? So this is about fellowship, as Rick talks about, but it's about that connection. So Reverend Sherri said, I felt like I need a New Thought baptism, like after, coming through this week, because it was so heavy with the doctor. It was like, I was like, okay, all right, I got it. Like, it was so much, it was like, maybe I need to get in the baptism pool. But I remember when I went to Unity, to the Unity Village, and I'm going to do a conference or a retreat or something at Unity Village, because it's just dynamic. It's just an amazing place, and I love what you guys have done at Unity. You guys absolutely rock, and I love that space. So I went there, and I said I felt like I took a New Thought bath. So besides the fact that the grounds are gorgeous, I mean, like nothing you could imagine, just gorgeous, absolutely amazing, just stunning. It's just beautiful foliage, just like you walk on the campus and it's like, oh. So the people are amazing. They are affirming of you in a way that only a New Thought person could be, in terms of just acknowledging the Christ in you. It's almost like you can hear people saying, I see the Christ in you, but they're not moving their lips, but it's in their speech. It just grabs you, and you just love it. And so I get in my room at the conference center, and first of all, like in the room, affirmations are everywhere, including in your hotel room. And so in my hotel room were affirmations on the wall. Like, that's the art on the wall, were these beautifully stenciled affirmations. And then everywhere you go on the campus is affirmations in the everywhere, like everywhere. They have the daily word, which if those in UFL, you know, that's like our daily inspiration. The daily word, which is their monthly devotional. It's available freely. Like there's thousands of copies just everywhere for you to pick up and take one. Um, Everywhere you go, there's all kinds of like, you know, stuff to remind you. When you sit down at the dining table in the dining room, the centerpiece is this like little crate. And mind you, the centerpieces might change, but this is what they were when I was there. This crate, and it's got these classic Unity texts there. So, you know, be ye transformed, and let there be light, and prosperity. And it's like, this is awesome. But what it felt like was a new thought bath. And so that like I had just been drenched in all of this affirmation. I've been drenched in all of this reminder of, yes, you are a spiritual being and you are living in a spiritual universe, and you are absolutely governed by spiritual law. So that's what the fellowship is like. It's the coming together of people, and that could be going to a play, that could be hanging out at somebody's house, that could be going bowling, or it could just be going down to the beach and hanging out and meditating on the beach. But the idea is that I'm coming together in this like-minded environment, and everything in this environment is going to remind me who I am. And I'm going to be just bathed in the idea that I am a spiritual being living in a spiritual universe governed by spiritual laws. That is the truth, that always has been the truth, and that always will be the truth. Then the fifth purpose of a church then is discipleship. It's teaching them to do. So all of this is based on the 19th and 20th verse in the 28th chapter of Matthew, teaching them to do the discipleship. So this is that skill acquisition. So this is one of the things that I feel like we give people what they need as far as a spiritual message, but we don't help them with the practical application of the spiritual message. And I think I understand why we don't do that, because then maybe people would get hung up on the practice, and they would lose the principle because they were so busy honoring and worshiping the practice. So I do get why that could happen. But I think you got to help people have the habits of spiritual development. I think you got to help people have the habits of spiritual growth, of spiritual development. Teach people how to have a quiet time. Teach people how to have what a morning routine looks like. Give them a formula for a morning routine, and then program around it so that they can that they can anchor it in. It's one of the things that we do during Lent, is that we teach people how to have a morning routine. And it's very simple. We put together a morning phone call, and then we put the tools of how to have a morning routine inside the morning phone call. And then we coach people, listen, when Lent ends, don't let this end. You keep going. You keep doing it. And I know some of you go back and you will actually rewatch the material from Lent and have your own personal Lenten experience, because what we're teaching you to do is, how do I keep myself growing? And it's through that morning, that daily practice, that keeps you growing and developing and becoming more. Ray says the Lent series are out of this world. Yes, they are. So I wanted to give you that context for what are those 5 purposes. So worship, ministry, evangelism, or going out and sharing this information, fellowship, and discipleship. So those are the 5 purposes. So then the next piece of that is that you put together small groups. And what a small group can be, 2, 3, 4 people. He said more than 7 or 10 people is too much, because then it's easy for people to recede into the background. So these are really, really small groups. These are little house ministries, if you will. And you provide the material for them, or they are following along with whatever, say, the sermon series is. So for example, you know, this, I don't know that we will have it ready, but we have, we're getting ready to do the Dream Series in September, October, and November. And so that may be an opportunity to bring in some of the stuff that we've learned about small groups and to give them the information to, you know, to work with as we're working through that series. And in those small groups, what's happening is that we're giving them the practices that we want them to have. And then they're coming to church on Sunday and getting the information. They're in their small groups once a week, working with the information. We've got video, we got audio, we got all this information. And essentially what we're doing is that we are responding to every potential learning style, and helping people to actually live this information in their life. So it's exciting for us. It's really, really, really exciting for us to do. And small groups, I believe, are a way that you can break through that growth barrier and take the pressure off of the pastor being the person to do all of the ministry. One of the other things that they said is that from a pastor standpoint, that when you're getting ready to break that growth barrier, your role is going to change. And essentially you're giving up that control of the ministry, and instead of being a pastor, you become a rancher, and you've got other pastors or shepherds that are basically doing the work of the ministry for you. And then what your job is to feed the pastors. So you're equipping them, they're equipping the people that they're serving, and they're going and doing and supporting those people, and your organization has the opportunity to grow. Alita says, I went to a church that asked that you would be accountable for the people we sit with every Sunday. Great friendships were birthed from that. Yeah, I'm interested in how that works. So any level of just connecting with people, I think, is really powerful. What the small groups are is like, so for example, Alita, let's say, because you know the Dream Series. And so let's say that we have the opportunity for you to do a small group where you are. So what that would look like is that we would send you the material, Alita. You would invite your friends. They may not even be members of any New Thought church, but they're your friends, and they'd probably be open to this information. And it's like, hey guys, come on, let's go do this. We have this stuff that you know, my friends at Up Church have, and let's meet on a Tuesday night, and we'll look at whatever the lesson is. It'll be a video that we prepared for you or some written material, and then you guys are going to discuss the information. And then on Sunday you tune in for the live stream. That's what the small group is. So it doesn't necessarily have to be people at church. It could be people that are like your friends that you're connecting to. But what happens is that you take those purposes of the church that I described, which was the worship, ministry, evangelism, fellowship, and discipleship, and you infuse it into the small groups. So in the small group is, you know, teaching you how to do the practices. In the small group is the fellowship. But also in there's also a type of worship. So there might be like a meditation that you do before you like watch the video, you know, or a prayer that you do, but we would give you all of that information if you would, you know, serve as a host. And what happens in those groups is that you guys end up being able to be there for one another, and then it frees up the pastor that you know, because I mean, well, obviously you guys are in Chicago, so it would be a flight to Chicago for me to get out there and see somebody. But you guys are there taking care of one another. Any questions on this? Any ideas that popped up? Those of you that are active in ministry. Andrew, I thought about you and your husband. You guys need to come on out here for this conference next year, because it's for what you're doing with ease of spirit. So I'm going to give you the floor, Andrew, because I want you to tell us about your ministry. But what you guys are doing with ease of spirit, I think that especially because you guys are at the beginning stage of this, it would be really, really, really powerful for you guys to infuse this system into what you're doing. and it would help you explode your ministry. I think it really would, especially because you're at the beginning. So there's no, everything is being created, at this point. And so this material, I think, would be really powerful to get a hold of at the point where you guys are now. And Alita says this practice kept people from falling through the cracks, free the pastor. Yep. And that's exactly it. So it's, it inevitably, you end up with situations where the squeakier wheel gets the attention, squeakier wheel gets the oil, and there are people that are squeaky. And so it's very easy not to forget them because they're so squeaky. But then there's the person who never says anything, who, if you've got so much going on, it can be very easy to miss that person. Now, part of what you're doing in your training as a minister is that you're learning to listen more deeply. You're learning to open your ears, to just be available for who is hurting, and you are developing an ear to hear the hearts of your people. But even with that, it's still a challenge. Oh, Saba said you said something in your email about how you might administer the Bible Hangout differently moving forward. Yes. So one of the things that I am looking at is, okay, how do I go back and take those 5 purposes of the church and infuse them into the Hangout? How do I take the worship piece and infuse that in there? How do I take the ministry piece and infuse it in there? How do I take the evangelism and infuse it in there? And the fellowship and the discipleship? Something that I got too, and I'm going to do this, and it just won't happen today, but it'll be in the process, is for all of their online, everything that they do at Saddleback, everything, they always have a comment card, always. So they have built a culture of feedback. And I heard somebody say at one of them sessions that feedback is the breakfast of champions. You have to develop as a minister and as a ministry the ability to hear criticism and the ability to receive feedback. If you cannot be criticized and not basically pick up your toys and leave the sandbox, if you cannot hear constructive or even destructive, because it's not like everybody has a good tongue, right? Some people tell you something that hurts your feelings and you want to just quit. But you still have to have the ability to listen, to pray about it, and to ask what is the true message that the Spirit is trying to get through to you. So everything at Saddleback involves a comment card. And so they're able to get instant feedback on every message, on every service, on every event, on everything. And when I heard that, I was like, I got to do that. And so they even said on their ministry webpage, there's a comment card right at the bottom. So even anybody watching online will be able to comment instantaneously about their experience with any type of online offering. So that is one thing, and then also just the fellowship piece. And just thinking about that, I think we kind of get that, but I can always improve. And then the discipleship. I do it fairly consistently, but I haven't done it in this series because this series is a little different. But part of the discipleship is not discipleship. Part of the go make disciples evangelism is continually turning up the heat, continually asking for a greater commitment. That I do this. I love doing this. I sacrifice hanging out later and seeing more of Saddleback so that I could get back here and be available to do this because it's this important to me. So that give is off balance if there's not an ask. And the ask doesn't have to be financial. The ask can be in terms of commitment and what would be next steps. That's the other thing. They are excellent at next steps. You, whenever you finish one thing, they're like, okay, and here are your next steps. They are wonderful at next steps. And those are just not things, at least for the Bible Hangout, that I honestly have thought through. And so it's one of the things I'm looking to say, okay, if I'm going to do this differently and do this better, I'm going to take these practices, these best practices, and I'm going to put them in. Same thing in the ministry, that everything has a next step. And every level of next step has a type of commitment. So this was awesome because we read this at the end. I won't read it to you because I'll need to bring this in. But everything, this is going to be backwards. Everything has a covenant. So they believe in a covenant relationship. And so every step into the ministry is you making a new and deeper commitment to the ministry. And then asking people to do that and actually asking them to sign the covenant. So this was a covenant they passed out. They put it on this big, paper. I know you can't read that, but it says Covenant of the Purpose-Driven Fellowship. And just really, really, I think, powerful because sometimes in ministry, you want people to step up and volunteer, and you feel like people just should step up and volunteer. But most people don't do that. Most people actually have to be asked to volunteer. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. Ask for what you need. And so a lot of times ministries go without the help that they need because they never ask anybody. And I'm putting myself in that of learning how to ask, and then for me, it's not so much learning how to ask because I will ask, but I know that it's very easy to ask the same people over and over again because I know that I can depend on them. But you cultivate that not dependence, but that interdependence on other people by starting with a small ask and then making a bigger ask. And he went through this example of how, Jesus continually asked for a bigger and a bigger commitment to his ministry. And that it started out with come and see. When he first speaks to his disciples, follow me. Come and see. So it's very light. Oh, okay, well, I can get up and I can go follow you. But as they continued with him, it was a bigger and bigger commitment. Who is my mother? Who is my father? He who loves me will hate his mother and hate his brother. That it was a deeper and deeper commitment that was being asked. And so finally it was like, he who loves me, you will take up your cross. Like basically you're walking the same path that I'm going to walk if you love me. And so it was this continual ratcheting up of the commitment, and the growth is in that. If you think about anything that grows in your life, it grows based on the deepening of your commitment. If you don't deepen your commitment, it don't grow. If you're in a marriage, there's the I do stage, but then the life happens, and each time life happens, you've got to deepen that commitment to I do. And if at any point along the way one party opts out of the deepening of the commitment, the relationship begins to unravel. So it's the same thing in ministry or in any relationship where growth requires the deepening of the commitment. If you're going to get better at tennis, you got to deepen your commitment in terms of how you show up. If you're going to get better at cooking, you got to deepen your commitment at showing up in the kitchen and how you put ingredients together. And you can't keep doing the same dishes. You got to try new dishes so that you can expand your skills. So it's a natural movement that is happening. So those are the things I'm looking at for the Bible Hangout. Any other? I know that was a long-winded way, but that's my thing. I'm gonna get like Rick, y'all. I'm gonna learn how to. Yeah, wait. I'm gonna learn how to use slogans, but that's not my gift right now because he got a slogan for everything. Everywhere you turn, he got a slogan. Hello.
Reverend Sherri.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
You got it.
So I just wanted to comment because I was at the conference as well, and you were talking about deepening commitments, and that might sound a little scary for some people, but the wonderful thing about that is that this deepening of commitment actually results in everyone having the opportunity to really step into a greater expression of themselves and to reach those dreams that they have on their hearts. So without getting ahead of myself or speaking out of turn, I just want to say that we at Upchurch are poised for some tremendous things which will make available for everyone who wants to serve, more opportunities to serve, and make available for everyone who wants to grow, more opportunities to grow. And hopefully those people are one and the same.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? That was, yes, excellent. Thank you for chiming in. I almost text you, Jack, to say, hey, I'm gonna like pull you into this. This is my impromptu lesson. Uh, Anybody else? Andrew, are you there? I wanted to hear from you. I wanted to talk about the Ease of Spirit ministry. If you're still there. Hello, hello. Okay. Any other questions before we wrap out tonight? Was this helpful? Did you hear something that you could use in your ministry and in what you're doing? Many of us are in ministry. If you're on this broadcast, I recognize that the people who hear me tend to be in service in ministry in some way. Even if you're not in a church, you're likely to be a caregiver in some way, a nurse, caregiver, and and a therapist or counselor. Those tend to be people that show up for the Bible Hangout. Coaches. All right. If there are no other questions, thank you so much. I want to let you know next Thursday is July 4th. Next Thursday, July 4th. So I will free you for the holiday because I'm probably going to do something fun on the holiday. So we will not meet next week because it is July 4th. So our next meeting will be on July 11th. Have a beautiful 2 weeks. I look forward to seeing you guys. Thank you, Joe. Thanks. This was helpful. Thank you so much. You guys have a great night. Take care.